Today, we continue the conversation with a woman steeped in corporate organizational structure. 10 years ago, Michelle Black was a senior organizational development consultant in Brisbane, but felt she could be making a bigger difference. When she came upon university-level counseling and psychology, she couldn't get enough of it. Focusing initially on stress and anxiety among children and adults in care organizations, she has recently written a children's book called Ellie and the Sunflowers, aimed at soothing anxiety and worry in young people's lives. Using evidence-based tools, the story keeps the learnings external, which allows them to be more easily received by children of diverse abilities. The story of Emily and her new horse, Ellie, are ideal for these times of isolation where kids may be feeling lonely, confused, unsure, and even anxious. My daughter, my 4-year-old, and I read this book together, and I think every kid gets something different from it, whether it's the animals, whether it's the story. My daughter was so concerned, who's Emily, who's Ellie? Once she got that clear, she seemed to be happy. So the stats say that 6% of children across our population experience anxiety. But I'm going to shift slightly, I hope Michelle's okay with this, I'm going to lighten the word up slightly. I'm going to call it angst. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I really want to include more kids in this category, because I know that would include me growing up. And so I hope for moms that you're able to listen in. Don't worry, Mom. I don't think it was clinical anxiety, but even if it is, that's okay too. And what I really want to do is open up that what you've done, Michelle, thank you for sharing, writing this book. And I know you're very passionate about it, and we want to understand more and really delve into this story of anxiety for kids in particular. So thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks, Sarah. It's always great to connect with you and lovely to see you again. Yeah.
Oh, yay. So look, I'm super curious why you chose a girl and a horse to bring forth these scientifically proven techniques. You could have just, submitted a mantra or something to kids, but no, you wrote this beautiful story. So curious, did you grow up with horses, and what's your history with this special animal?
Yeah, well, actually, I grew up afraid of horses. But the story for me was really looking at my core philosophy in helping people to learn and grow, and that is meeting people where they're at. So I'm not a fan of labeling or, kind of having children walking around with labels like, oh, she's shy, he's anxious, he's this, he's that. And so for me, being able to really think about how do we reach children to learn and grow without them feeling like this is some form of judgment or anything like that. And story is such a fascinating and such a wonderful way to bring children along with you. So that was really the theme behind the horse. I actually fell in love with horses when my son, who grew up horse mad, never had a horse. And I kept saying, oh, when you're 10, and when he was 9, he was like, 1 more year. and yeah, we moved our lifestyle, and soon after Perry was 10, we moved. We got him doing some horse riding lessons initially in Sydney when he was 10. And then when we moved, we found a fantastic coach for him. And at the time, I would take him to his lessons, and I would think, I can't work out why he's so passionate about it. And then after about the second lesson, I felt this real sense of presence inside my body as I was watching him. I was just ever so proud that he was so small, and he would be on top of this great big horse, just totally beaming. And it was like he was a different boy at that time. And then the more times I went to the lessons, the more present I became, and then the more curious I became. And it was the curiosity that really kind of drew me into the horses, and watching Perry as my son, but as this role model who in my mind was just so brave and courageous to be up there riding that horse. Yeah.
I asked that question slightly self-serving because the girl that I played beach volleyball with most of my life and a best friend was horse mad. And I always was it was transformative for her as well. And she brought me to the horses a couple times and really showed me. She said, with horses, you can't hide, you can't pretend, you can't talk your way out of it.
Yeah.
Which I felt was quite confronting because clearly I'm podcasting, so I like to talk my way out of things. And so thank you for sharing that you were initially afraid, because I think that allows all of us that maybe don't have that natural, what Perry had, to come forward. And because I know that in the story, I was saying about Emily, the little girl, and then Ellie, the horse, Ellie's the one who the story is really kind of traveling down. So you as a little girl, though, were afraid of horses. Were you afraid of other things too? And what was your kind of experience with worry or anxiety or?
Yeah. Well, I guess my real standout experience was standing out, and that would provoke a bit of anxiety for me. So I was just I was a pretty small child, relatively nerdy, and standing out made me feel really unsafe. So I remember a time when I had practiced and practiced, and I was obsessed with my trumpet and playing, and I loved it. And this Anzac Day, my grandfather, who's a war veteran, was coming to watch, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so exciting, he's coming to watch. I practiced like incessantly for hours and hours and hours every day, building up. So there were 4 of us playing together, and I would do the big crescendo in the last post, and I was like really pumped. And we get there, and there's a whole crowd of people, and our teacher has us all, and we practice morning, noon, and night, and we're all lined up there. And while we were playing together, it was great. And then all of a sudden I had to go into this solo, and I did. And then something happened in my body, which was just, it was so scary for me as a child. I was in grade 4 or 5 at the time. And my whole body started trembling, and it felt like there was something that just stopped my throat and my breath moving, and my lips were quivering. So here I am doing this crescendo, and it was like incredibly mournful, because it was like, ooh, so most people thought I did that deliberately, but for me, I just, was really kind of stuck in that moment, and noticed that when the others came back in after I'd finished that kind of more solo piece, that I felt this real calming come back into my body. I still felt humiliated and said, I will never, ever do this again. And it took me quite some time just to pick up my trumpet. And, I analysed it thinking, God, did I not practice enough? Am I not good enough to be standing up here? What on earth happened? And, I didn't understand it. I couldn't process it. And what that did for me at the time, which I know now, is it positively reinforced for me that standing out was scary.
Yeah, got it. And maybe that you should reconsider and not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And okay, so I'm totally curious about that story, because I think we all were transported there. And I think a lot of people have different moments, a moment where we made a decision, and then it led to certain things. So how long did it take you to really understand what happened there and to start to shift that?
Yeah, it took me a little while. I still played my trumpet, and I practiced always on my own out the back, so as if that wouldn't make attention. So I kind of didn't in the backyard, and then so it actually took me a while as I grew, and I noticed that these things were happening in my body. I would just try to kind of curiously understand what was happening, and so I would try to fight it at first, and I would think about it and try to fight it, and then I just decided that I had to look at it in a different way. And I was in my very early career, like super early 20s, and I had to do a speech, and I was like, oh God. And I was kind of, I just said yes at the time when they said, we have this situation, there's 400 people, we really we want somebody to go in, and for whatever reason they wanted a female to go in, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And then when it came to the day, I was like, what was I thinking? I can't do it. And all my stomach was in a knot and I felt really nauseous. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to put the attention on me. You know how people say, oh, imagine somebody's naked or something. I couldn't do that because that's kind of a little creepy for me. But I thought what I need to do is get people to take their attention off me in order to hear me and in order for me to be relaxed. And so I started this thing, and I don't even know where it came from, but I asked everybody to close their eyes and imagine that they were making a cocktail. There was a lesson in the making the cocktail. So in the, you know, what is it, putting all the ingredients in, what does it taste like, and then making another cocktail now and put the ingredients in, then put something that shouldn't be in there, and what does that taste like? And then we kind of went into the whole talk, which was really about what information you put in is what you get out. So it was a talk around systems and things like that.
Very clever.
But what I learned in that experience is that, you know, I'm naturally a pretty playful person, and I thought, you know, I've got nothing to lose to bring a new approach. If I had said that to other people, they would have said, no way, you can't do that with that audience. And so I just kind of, in that moment, backed myself and said, I'm just going to give this a try and see if that helps me to be more present and more calm. And it really changed how I presented, and it really changed the outcome. So that was really that first point to say, I can take charge of this. I don't have to be driven by this feeling. And I got curious and I just wanted to learn more and more and more. So
yeah, cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing so specifically. I really appreciate that, because I think when you were explaining your instrument story, I automatically was sort of translating it into speaking in front of a group. And then I'm also, you know, as a mom, and I hope moms are listening, because as a mom, I'm noticing my daughter, and I see kids doing this all the time. There's such freedom around music when they dance. They're just like so free. And I kind of observe her when other people come around. Does she shift? What is that? Because she's like a performer in a way that I think, oh, I've got too much going on for myself to allow myself to do that. Too self-conscious. Whereas I find she's really free. And so what is anxiety really? And like, how does it manifest in kids? And why do some of them take this? I believe they start like you with that music and loving it and passionate, almost not second guessing. What is it? Is it an event? Is it what is anxiety?
It's a combination of things, and there's no way to specifically pinpoint it. Sometimes you can pinpoint it as a result of a specific event, like a traumatic experience or something like that. But generally, it's a blend of things. It's a blend initially of what our life events have been around our experiences, but it's about how we're perceiving, whether we're a tiny child, before we're even aware of that. It's how we perceive through our senses. And then that sends the messages to, first of all, the emotion part of our brain, which determines our emotion. And our emotion actually will then go to the thinking part of our brain. So if we're perceiving in that perception, like something that might be perceiving as dangerous, or and then it will very quickly happen, and it all happens in milliseconds, like absolute milliseconds, that it'll go to your emotion, to your thoughts, and then your behavior will reflect. And it's very automatic. So we're not always aware of it. You know, I was so surprised when I learned that only about 15% of what we do are we aware of, and the rest, we're actually not consciously aware of that until we make really deliberate effort to start to be aware. So, and for children, it's way more distressing, because children don't understand the feelings and the sensations that are happening in their body, and what's causing that. And you know, sometimes what can elevate anxiety is the response of people around them. So if I were anxious as a child, I would go internal. My sister, as a child, she would be full of beans, like just, she would couldn't concentrate. She was like always moving. And so, you know, I would be getting speak up, and then my sister would be getting sit down, be quiet. And all of that has an impact on your response, and also how people respond with you. So one of the things that I notice a lot is, you know, if in my experience, you know, as the tension increased in my family, so, you know, if my parents argued, and, you know, it's a natural part of living, but if they argued and were shouting, that straight away my anxiety would go whoop straight up, and then my would I guess behavior response was go internal and just find somewhere so you're not being seen or heard. And but my sister, she'd be like running around and things like that. And so it's getting back to what causes anxiety. It's multiple factors. It is driven by how we perceive. It is driven by life events. And sometimes it's driven by the chemical responses in our body. So sometimes we might be prone to be, so my sister and I, we come from the same parents. You know, she was more prone to being hyperactive, where I was much more prone to being hypoactive. So less. So just, come away from the situation. So,
So glad you're giving these examples, because that's when you talked about, when we initially were talking about having this conversation, I was thinking, you know, I think it manifests itself in different ways in different people. So your sister, that comparison is so beautiful, because I, even to this day, when I'm nervous, I go over. Like my thing too is I almost act like too cool. Like I've got this. I'm all together, like almost too much. And I think sometimes it's like society responds differently. It's almost like some responses are more acceptable than others, and that would reflect back on it, like, oh, well, I won't really deal with that because society thinks that's okay, but I know in me, I'm not me. Like you said, I'm not really present.
Yeah, and that's so important for you to raise that about. It is the society and the judgment, and even in our own examples, everybody thought I was the good child. I was the terrified child. and everybody thought that, you know, my sister was belligerent, you know, the naughty girl. She just wouldn't listen, wouldn't sit down. She couldn't listen. She couldn't sit down. She didn't know what was happening in her body, and nobody knew how to help her in the right way. So the stigma that goes to that really can affect children's experiences, but most importantly, it can affect how the children feel about themselves, and then what they engage in, and their whole life outcomes. You know, my sister, she didn't, school was not something that she could settle into, so that was problematic. But for me, school, I could be nerdy, I could be internal. It was fantastic.
Yes.
So
it's such a good thing you're saying there, because, you know, how we judge, for example, there's a lot of generalization, about boys needing to move all the time and rambunctious. And you think about this one learning style, you know, sitting in a classroom on a chair. And I know this is coming out a lot more now, that, you know, it doesn't actually reflect intelligence, but again, I think it can affect future outcomes.
Absolutely.
Which I love that you're bringing up. So we have to get to this book, and this mantra, to me, it evokes a visual. In the book, you can see that it's a running theme, which I think for kids is amazing. And I'm going to read it. And it's something that Emily, the little girl, says to her horse. She says, "This is what I do." And you'll remember better, but that's just, I'm just going to show everyone who's watching on YouTube. Here's the beautiful front cover of, again, Jordan, my daughter, wanted to know who's Ellie, and we thought it was a little girl, and it's not. So you have to read it to find out. But she says, you know, I stand very tall. I feel my feet on the floor. I breathe nice and slow. I extend my limbs, and I look up to the sky. And it's funny, I'm reading it and I'm doing it. I can't help it. My feet untucked each other. They went on the ground. My breathing. and I put my arms up, I extend it up. And so
Yeah.
what makes this statement so powerful, Michelle? And
Mm.
especially for kids experiencing anxiety.
It's really powerful because it's a way that the children can take actions and they will feel the physical response in their body, which will make their body much calmer. So the actions really come from the evidence, the empirical evidence. So the breath, there is oodles of evidence on how the breath can lower our autonomic nervous system response. So when we go into that feeling afraid, we're in fight or flight mode. So even if we're internalizing, we're still in fight or flight mode. And so the breath actually tells our body, hey, it's okay. When we feel our feet on the floor, the feeling brings us back into our body. But the key of imagining that I'm a sunflower allows the brain to toggle out of fear and to ignite imagination so that the children are thinking about sunflowers. And who doesn't feel happy when you think about a sunflower, really? The colors, the brightness, all of that is very important in the imagination. Extending your limbs is really to open up this kind of part of the body, the chest area, because when we're afraid, sometimes our natural response is to come forward and to close in, and that blocks our polyvagal nerve. And so by extending our limbs, we're also kind of allowing our body to feel safe. As an organism, the body feels much safer. And looking up to the sky just kind of makes you feel great, like while you're extending your limbs, feeling your feet on the floor and imagining. Now, when children do that just for like a minute or 2 minutes, it just completely brings down their autonomic nervous system and they come into a much calmer state. So I really like to do it with children, because it's when you do it with children that you actually physically see the difference. And children of all kinds of ability can relate. And even children that I work with that have, aren't able to do those movements, they can imagine that they're doing those movements and it has the same effect. Yeah.
Really
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said the sunflower thing, because I didn't even mention that part, did I? I just launched right into that mantra, because in my mind, I knew that I was visualizing it. So
yeah,
I've got so many thoughts about this. So I want to touch on two. I want to touch on my daughter doing yoga, because I want to say something about what you're doing here.
Yeah.
But second, this show has just shifted from being called the Nat and Sarah Show to being called In the Game Podcast. And so Nat, the other half of this show, all about superhero pose. And the reason that she's into it is not because of Amy Cuddy's TED Talk that was like the most watched of all time, but hers is more because that's what she used to perform in sport when she felt, like you said, her limbs bending forward. When she felt that inside of herself she couldn't do it, it was her way of igniting her imagination.
Yeah.
And she's gone on to speak about that to so many people who often think it's a concept, they think, oh, that's really great for you. And she's like, no, stand up. We're doing this, and really showing people the value of getting in those postures. And so for kids to be able to experience this young, my daughter, so what I was going to share was that my daughter doing yoga, there's some, like this one child, and my daughter even by the end was doing the same thing, getting quite jittery in the class. And when it comes to the last 5 minutes where they all lay down in their version of Shavasana, firstly, it's all their favorite pose. I think that's really interesting. They all start cheering. I go, wow. Even unconscious, they feel their body on the ground. They start to change their breathing. She does a little bit of massage on their feet, and it's my daughter's favorite part. And to watch these children, they completely shift. It's actually unbelievable. So I can imagine what this is creating for people as well, for kids.
Yeah.
So that was a long diatribe, but you got me excited about that part, about the evidence. So you don't label people. Why did you choose Ellie as the focal point, not Emily, let's say the owner of the horse?
I think it came really naturally in I just felt like it was a really nice way for children to relate. Yeah. Yeah. There's no judgment on the horse or, yeah.
I thought, yeah, I thought it was really cool that you did that because I felt that there was an obvious kind of way that it was going to go. You chose another way, and that for me was non-threatening
Yeah.
because it was just like an animal, and so I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, you've given us some beautiful descriptions of how you've dealt with your own angst from growing up.
Mm.
What do you hope for kids who perhaps just took out their trumpet or horn or were doing some sort of performance and something happened? What's your hope that this book in their hands might provide for them?
Yeah. I hope that it will provide them with the confidence to be who they are and to know that they can take charge of those feelings. That's really most important, because as a child, you often don't know. And somebody might label that, but then that has its own implications, and they're not always positive implications. But certainly for a child to learn from that book, they can be who they want to be. They can do what they want to do, and they can do that with confidence and in charge of the feelings in their body.
Yeah, beautiful. So just to pull this all full circle, because your story is so interesting, because you were very successful in the corporate structure. And like you said a couple of times, being nerdy, I think schooling and like education was something that you have a lot in you. And you said, you know what, there's more. I can make a bigger difference. How is what you're doing now fulfilling on that for you?
Oh, in so many fabulous ways. For me, doing all my corporate work and like the way that I was being through school and through my corporate life was how I survived. You know, it gave me results. It gave me great opportunity to really be able to have a good life and be independent and assured that I could do things for myself, really. What When I made that decision that something was missing, I knew it deep inside that something was really missing. And when I had really found that, and I thought, oh my goodness, there is such an opportunity to make a bigger difference. And that's kind of taking, the wisdom that I've learned over the years, but the evidence, and then, I have quite a bit of playfulness about me, and I think that kind of led to some of my success in the way that I worked with people, because it's different, and it is, and people don't expect it. They think I'm such a serious person that when we get playful, they're like, what? And actually, that's quite fun in itself. So, so I learned to take all of my wisdom and those skills and the research and really looked at what has worked to apply them. And that's where I really feel is where the big impact can come, because the more we stop labeling and the more we start being able to give people ways to be who they are, and to for people to be able to give themselves permission to just be who they are and not care about what other people think, and be judged and things, then our whole communities will be safer, they'll be happier, they'll be a lot more productive and a lot more positive to be in.
Yeah. So that was going to be my last question, but I'm sorry, I got one more.
Yeah.
Because when you brought up being playful, how it surprises people, I have to come back before you ever had that moment of angst.
Yeah.
Do you remember having a dream for your life as a little girl? Like what kind of things were you into? What was your way of being? Who was Michelle as a little girl?
I was a lot of things. I would vary at different times, but interestingly, teaching and developing seems to be the common theme in my life. One of my first work experiences was in a school for children with special needs, and I loved it. And I was only young, and I really loved it. And life circumstances, I didn't actually have the opportunity to pursue that. And I look now, and it's almost like your life comes full circle, because they're exactly the people that I love working with, and yeah, that I've written the book for, and that I create other resources for. So yeah.
Thank you. Because I wanted to ask, because I really feel that we have this thread in us and we find our way back. It's like this honesty, this, our dreams are always possible when we're
Yeah.
young. And somehow all these twists and turns,
Yeah.
we find our way there again. And so I just feel really like blessed to talk to people like you, share that with people, because I think some people are just at different curves, in their little.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things is always believing that you can do it. There's always a lot of people around you that go, that'll never happen. And just keeping that belief that you're here with a gift. What is that gift, and how are you going to use it? So
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for representing that exact statement. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.